How do you bring your business from 7 to 8 figures and more? How do you integrate AI in your business? How do you cope when you are overwhelmed? Those are some of the questions that I'll be tackling today with my guest, Charles Gaudet, an amazing individual, a big heart, and somebody who's helped a lot of companies doing exactly that. Enjoy the conversation with Charles. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meaning podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with a friend, somebody I admire that is an amazing human being with a big heart, very successful business entrepreneur, coach to 7, 8 figures companies. He's done so many different things in his life. And so we're going to talk about the business. We're going to talk about life. We're going to talk about what it takes to become not only an entrepreneur, but also a great business leader. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Charles Gaudet. Charles, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
The same here. And I'm so glad we can do this because you have so much knowledge. And I'm happy to speak with you because I know the listener are going to take some gems from this conversation. But first thing first, what is your story? And how did you get to what you're doing today?
So I've been an entrepreneur since the age of 4. Never had a traditional quote unquote real job. After graduating from college, I started a business nominated by Ernst & Young as being one of the nation's best seed stage companies. By 24, I created my first multi-million-dollar business. And then after that, I just continued to build and grow companies until 2010. And that's when somebody offered to pay me to help them grow their business. And I started Predictable Profits. And since that time, we've taken many companies to Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list. Just recently took a company from 950,000 to 46 million in 6 years. And typically people are coming to me asking 1 of 3 questions. They're saying, look, what's it going to take to grow a company faster? Or maybe they say things like, some months are feast, some months are famine. How do we bring more predictability into the revenue? Or the third one is, hey, the company's too dependent on me. How do we scale?
Awesome.
That's what brought me to where I am. So
Cool.
short and sweet, the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, right? I think that if you answer the full question, we're still recording in 2 hours, but that's true. Now, an entrepreneur since the age of 4. So
Yeah.
I know that for people watching, and I know I'm not the first one to tell you that, you look like the son of Richard Branson, right?
Right.
No. 4 years old and you're an entrepreneur. What is it that you were doing at that time?
So I was selling artwork to my neighbors. And, it's funny because we make decisions for one of 2 reasons. You either do it out of inspiration or desperation. And many people have this idea that you're born an entrepreneur. But in my case, I would say that I was more made an entrepreneur. And I say that because my dad worked every waking hour of every day. So when I got up in the morning, he had already gone to work. When I went to bed at night, he came home after I was already asleep. He did this for 7 days a week. In fact, I don't even really have memories of my dad until after the 3rd grade because he worked so hard for the family. But when I did see my dad, he would say, hey, if you ever want to make something yourself, you have to be an entrepreneur. And so here I am, 4 years old, wanting nothing more than the love and the affection of my father. And so I decided I would show him that I could run my business. And so I did that. And of course, he was proud of me. And that just sort of started that, bug of, wow, this felt good. So I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. And so it turned out to be something that I'm grateful for. And obviously, I love my life and what we've been able to create and all that other fun stuff. But I wasn't born an entrepreneur. I was basically made one. And I'm sure Freud would have a field day on how all of that went down. But yeah, it is what it is.
Very interesting because, as you know, I'm originally from Belgium. And in Belgium, entrepreneurs are seen very badly.
Yeah.
And here is like almost the poster child of American dream. And to your point, there is a lot in between. Not everybody should be an entrepreneur. And it's not for everyone because it's heavy, it's a roller coaster. But when you have started Predictable Profit and there's somebody who came and asked you to pay you to advise them, what were you feeling? And did you know immediately that you were going to build a business around that?
Not at all. In fact, I had, he said, hey, can you help me grow my business? And I'm like, I suppose. And he said, all right, what are you going to charge me? And I'm like, I don't even know. Like, you throw an offer by me, like, what will you pay me? And he said, I don't know, does $500 an hour sound fair? And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, that sounds more than fair. Yeah, absolutely. So, he made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. Now, what's interesting is that's the first and last time that I ever accepted anything to do by the hour. Because on one hand, I liked the security of knowing that I would get paid for every hour of time that I worked. And that was really great. It was predictable, $500, you know what you're getting. But on the flip side of the coin, what I didn't like is that I was, when you're on the phone with your attorney and you're paying a lot of money, it's like, let's get rid of the small talk. Let's get right down to business and get on and off the call as fast as you can. And I didn't like the fact that I felt like the attorney on the other side of the phone. I couldn't build the relationships that I wanted to have. Couldn't ask the questions that I knew would make a true meaningful impact in somebody's business because there was this rush to get me off the phone. And so I decided that's not the type of business that I want to be in. And so then I changed it to a different model, and we did more performance-based stuff, and that was really good. And the performance-based stuff was great when I was doing the work for other people. But then I also realized if I'm doing the work for other people, the money is really great, but I'm also doing them a disservice because I'm doing all the work for them. It's that old saying, if you want to teach a man to fish, that whole bit, right? So it's like, instead, I'm doing all the work for them, and then they are now, fully dependent on me. And then I felt a little out of integrity there. And then eventually said, you know what? I'm going to teach everybody how to do the things that I do and why I've been able to get the results that I've been able to get over the years. And then that's when the business really took off. And that's when we were really empowering people. And we created a heck of a lot more results doing it that way than when I was doing it on my own.
I love that. And what you say about lawyers remind me of a joke from my grandfather. I was telling that the guy's going into the lawyer's office and see the plaque on the desk. 2 questions, $5,000. And the guy said, $5,000 for 2 questions? Are you nuts? Say, no, I went to this law school and this is my experience, and it's totally justified. Now, what is your second question?
Yeah.
Charlie, you had a moment in your life, and I would like to ask you about that because you're coaching people. I'm coaching people in the meetings and event industry, which is obviously much more narrow, but you have basically walked the talk before anything else, and you paid a lot to be coached by Tony Robbins, and you spend a lot of time with your wife. Can you tell us about this experience and how is this impacting you until today?
So I used to run by this idea that I would shovel crap for $1 million. Right? I was so motivated by money that I said I would shovel crap for $1 million. And inevitably, I made my first million, but I felt like I did just that. I shoveled crap. So financially, I reached a new peak. Emotionally, I was at a new low. And I got to this point where the stress was overwhelming. I remember sitting at the dining room table and I slammed my fist down on the table. It shook all the glasses and everything. And I'm holding my chest, and it scared my wife. And she said, what's going on? And I'm like, I just can't go on living like this. Can't do this. I was in pain every night because my chest was hurting. And so she says, look, there's this guy I saw on TV, Tony Robbins, he's supposed to help in situations like this. I don't know, maybe you should give it a shot. And so long story short, I ended up hiring Tony, and we ended up investing in one of his more premium programs. So between my wife and I, it was about $250,000. And I'm with Tony out in Whistler, Canada. And he says to me, what do you want? And I go, what do I want? And it was the first time it actually came out of my mouth. And it was troubling to me because I never thought I would have this issue. And I said, Tony, all I want is to be happy. Like, I forgot what it was like to be happy. And so the work with Tony was less about business and it was more about myself. You see, I believe, and Tony is the one who initially taught me this, how you do anything is how you do everything. Like, if you want to be the best business coach or you want to help people the most as possible, like, you got to make sure that all areas of your life are aligned. You'll be that much more powerful. So if you can get your inner self in alignment, That's going to allow you to see things differently, see opportunities differently. It'll allow you to, get a little bit more excited about the possibilities that exist. If your inner self is dark and gloomy, you're going to tend to look more in the reasons why things can't happen or why things aren't possible. And that's also going to cloud your judgment on the coach side. So, yeah, so that was a really big moment for me in getting the inner work set up so that I could be more powerful in my ability to serve others as a coach.
Interesting. Because I was thinking when you were mentioning that, because I have the privilege in being in your boardroom and benefit from your research and what you're doing, but it's always with a purpose and always bringing people together, which I like. The other thing I like as well is that you're testing a lot of things yourself before sharing with others, and you're doing a lot with AI. So I would love for you to share with people listening how they should look at AI in their business and what type of tools or what type of strategy they should be using in order to leverage all the tools while remaining human in what they do.
So I made some very big mistakes early on in that I allowed my personal bias to cloud the data statistics and what I really believe to be true. I mean, I didn't believe that mobile technology would take off. I'm like, it's so much easier to work on your computer. Why would anybody want to spend all that time on their cell phone? And so, I was late to the game on mobile. I didn't believe Bitcoin was anything that should be taken seriously. And I could have got in when it was a couple pennies and, I overlooked that. There were many investment opportunities where people came to me and was like, hey, you should do this. Because I only saw one side of the picture. When I attended the U.S. Army War College as a civilian, one of the things that was interesting is they talked about ignorance is only seeing things from one side. But wisdom is when you actually take the time to make an argument that is just as strong on something that you don't believe to be true. And when you begin to see things from both sides, you can make better judgment calls. And so when it came to AI, my initial impression of AI was, oh, this is just going to be a fad. Where who's going to use this? I don't want to do it, blah, blah, blah. But then I learned from my mistakes and I started looking at the data on the other side. And come to find out, it appeared back in January 2023 that AI would be even more disruptive than the internet was back in the 90s. And initially, people thought AI was just a matter of, write me an article on such and such, or using AI as a replacement of Google. And very early on, you could see people or people who just start using AI. AI is not that good, or AI is wrong half the time, or whatever that might be. Well, they're missing the point. The quality of the input is reflective of the quality of the output. You don't blame the paintbrush for a bad painting. Ultimately, that's the painter who controls the paintbrush. The same thing goes with AI. You are the painter. You are the person that is entering the input. If you're not getting a good output, you have to go back and reflect on the input that you're at. So now let's go one level deeper. So let's ignore the fact that AI is wrong or whatnot. It's more, if you want a better output, you have to be better at the input. But what is the capabilities of AI? There are different levels. At one level, it's, replacement of Google and creating content. But then you go a level deeper and you realize it's artificial intelligence. The key word there is intelligence. You have the most intelligent employees in your business available to work for you 24/7. If you had that technology and that resource, the most intelligent employee to work for you, what would you ask it and what would you have it do? And when you can break AI into different functions and you can say, you know what, this is going to be my HR AI. It's going to help me write job ads that are appropriate for the role and my company. It's going to help me select candidates based on the job ad and based on my company and what my expectations are. It's going to help me customize interview questions. It's going to help me all this other stuff. You can have marketing AI bots. You can have sales AI bots. You can have administrative assistant AI. And all of a sudden you realize that you have all these people across the board in AI different functions And now you're able to see things that other people can't see. And when I say see things that other people can't see, if you were my AI, companion, I would be having debates with you, which I do all the time. I'll sit there and I'll say things like, how would the role of a traditional B2B salesperson become obsolete by the year 2028? Now, it's an interesting question, but it's like, we know that every role and every function and every company will be disrupted by AI. We just don't know how. Fortunately, AI will turn around and they'll tell us. So this is how things are changing. And then based on all the data and all the trends and everything else, it goes ahead and it spits it out. So now a lot of people will stop there and they'll panic because they realize the role of the B2B salesperson then becomes severely disrupted and changed by the year 2028. In fact, the data shows that the B2B salesperson is going to take on more of a role of a client experience person than it actually will be by sales. Our buyers have become researchers. They're far more educated. They're not going to expect you to be like, Eric, tell me everything I need to know about such and such. At this point, they'll already know. It's more of a client experience person. And there's an example I'll give you in a minute, Eric, with a mutual friend of ours that references. But then you can turn around, you can ask AI how to compete against itself. So what are the skills that that a B2B salesperson would need to develop by the year 2028 in order to remain relevant? And then you're going to get a whole new skill set. And so it's like, okay, so now there's a lot of ways in which you can now see things into the future that you wouldn't have seen just being locked in the office and trying to figure things out on your own. Because AI will throw something at you from a different lens and a different experience that will get you thinking, go, interesting. Well, let's explore that a little bit more and see what it means by that. It allows you to be far more intelligent because you're able to consume different perspectives at different angles and go down these rabbit holes. Now, just touch base on that example, mutual friend. I say friend loosely, colleague. You and I were in California and we saw Will Guidara speak, right?
Yeah.
And so Will Guidara, for those who don't know, he wrote the book Unreasonable. Yes, exactly. 11 Madison Avenue, #1 restaurant in the world. And so Will said, I believed that when somebody makes a reservation, especially at the #1 restaurant in the world, that they want to speak to a person. They want to speak to a person. They want to make the reservation. They want the experience right off the bat, and then blah, blah, blah. But all his colleagues and his employees are saying, no, people want to book reservations online. And he goes, no, that's not the case. But he heard it enough that finally he was like, fine, let's give it a shot. And people preferred it. They preferred to make reservations online. What they wanted afterwards was the restaurant to talk to them only after they made the decision to make the experience better. Tesla did the same thing. Tesla's like, you know what? You can buy a $110,000 Tesla using your mobile phone, but you'll talk to a human after you make the commitment. Right. And so it's like, you can already start to see the trends, happening little at a time. And we'll see it more as years go on.
Very interesting. Now, we both are a father and our children mean the world to us. How are you coaching your children? What are you telling them that they should be learning or studying, not to be overcome or overwhelmed with what's coming because of the change and because of AI?
Great question. So I tell my kids, you don't need to know the answers anymore. And so that's a big change from just a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, it was all about find the answers. You want to be the best. You have to be the most knowledgeable. You've got to find the answers. That's different now. You have to be able to know the right questions to ask. And so that creates a totally different muscle. You have to build that creative thinking muscle in your brain. And for many of us, that's way underdeveloped muscle because it's the quality of your questions will be directly reflective of the quality of your answers. We're not used to really going that level deeper. Most of us have level 1 thinking when it comes to the questions that we know to ask. Then when you get to level 2 and you go much deeper, now all of a sudden you're starting to see a big gap in advantages. And the people who we look at today and we're like, wow, they're so smart. How did they get that way? It's because they started asking different questions that nobody else thought to ask. They didn't have the answers. They were able to find the answers once they knew the question. And then you go down to level 3, and level 3 is when now, you're doing the 80-20 on the 80-20 in terms of the question. Like, only very few percent of the people even know to ask the questions that are being asked at that level. And that's sort of the advantages. So it's like with the kids, I want them to build this muscle of knowing the questions to ask and just constantly ask questions.
Very interesting. It reminded me when my daughters were younger, they would come back from school and I would ask them, I would not ask them how was their day. I was ask them, what kind of question did you ask today?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I work with a number of different lawyers, and so one of the people I work with is one of the top lawyers in the entire country. Right. And so I reviewed a motion for him. And now I'm not a lawyer or whatnot, but I was doing this as a legal representative from somebody else, blah, blah, blah. And even though this person is one of the top lawyers in the entire country, I decided I'm going to work with AI, and I'm going to ask AI, because I'm not a lawyer, what is the defense's argument based on this motion? How are they going to respond and counteract? Then I go, okay, what is the prosecutor's response? Now, if you're the defense attorney, how could you make this motion stronger based on the prosecutor's response? And it turned around and it readjusted the motion and said, here's how it would make it better. And so we went back and forth. Again, see, this is a perfect example of knowing what questions to ask, because I am not an attorney. And I just then grabbed the response and shared it with one of the top attorneys in the world. Hey, what do you think about this? And his response back was all capital letters, yes, exclamation points for 2 lines in the email.
Wow.
So when we talk about artificial intelligence, in that case, that bot was somebody there to help me explore things from a legal perspective. And then that allowed me to do something and offer advice to somebody that has decades of experience and awards in legal. And yet I was able to offer something that he hadn't seen. I knew different questions that he wasn't asking.
Very interesting. Now you make me think about another question when in the work you do. You mentioned that, talking about the lawyer and big firms, but big corporate in general, or a senior executive, you said it's easier to coach them than to coach startup.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's interesting. Why so? Because I would think that somebody who's starting a company who has a few years of experience would be more coachable because they have so much more to learn.
Sure. Well, you're a parent, right? Do you find it easier to give a 13, 14-year-old life advice or a 30-year-old life advice?
So I'm going to answer like a lawyer. It depends.
Right?
Probably at 30 years old.
Right. Because the 13-year-old at that point, they haven't had enough experiences to experience struggle and pain and, all this other stuff, a failure to the degree that somebody a few decades later would have experienced, right? So, and with a lot of startups, and you see this all the time, they give you a business plan. We say, okay, what is your revenue projection this year? Oh, we'll be at $8 million. Wait a minute. How much money are you making right now? Nothing. You're going to go from nothing to $8 million. Yes. All we need is just 1% of the market. And then, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, got it. What is your strategy for getting there? And it's like, well, our product is so good, it's just going to take off like wildfire. And you go, so it's like, okay, you don't have enough experience to know that, you're underestimating the level of difficulty that it will take to get to that point. Then you actually talk to somebody who's seasoned, somebody who's already built a business doing 7, 8 figures. And you ask them, like, what are your projections? And many of them will have projections. Maybe they'll say, you know what, we've been at this for a while. It's more likely going to be the same, which is why we're talking. Or they're going to say, It's like 10, 15%, but I want more, or it's 30%. And I think we're capable of more. But all of a sudden things are a little bit more realistic. And you can give them strategies that then line up well with expectations because it may not be the sexiest thing in the world. You say, look, we need to ultimately look at, developing a strategy to get you more MRR, more monthly recurring revenue. We need to get you 50, 60% of all your revenue to get recurring revenue. Let's build up that strategy, and that will allow you to build that solid foundation, blah, blah, or let's reduce your churn, or, let's eliminate, refunds, whatever that might be. And, for the young entrepreneur, the startup, that's not sexy. They don't want to do that. For the startup, it's like, do you have any growth hacks? Do you have any growth hacks you can help me? What's the latest technology that you're using right now that I can buy just to say that I have it and I'll do nothing with it, right? Like, what's that? Yeah. It's the same thing that happens over and over and over again. So yeah.
When you are looking at the people you're coaching now, we are in June 2024. What are the challenge they're looking at? What are the concern that they have for the next 12 months?
So the challenges are twofold. Number one, this challenge has been around for as long as I've been coached. Most businesses have built their business from word of mouth and referrals and a whole heck of a lot of hard work. And so, now they're trying to figure out, how do I scale beyond that? And, how do I build scalable marketing and sales strategies? That's something that, continues to happen over and over and over again. But in today's economy, it's changed a little bit more. There's different challenges. In some cases, it's a matter of, the clients are tightening their belt and they're leaving to go somewhere else. Or maybe they're finding pressure to lower their prices because they haven't figured out a way to become the most expensive competitor and still have people lining up to do business with them. There's a lot of extra noise. People are spending more time doing research. I mean, average person right now, the average buyer is looking at 27 different sources of information before making a buying decision. So
27.
So it's like, there's some data suggesting that's upwards of like 36 right now. So, they're going through the cycle of exploration and evaluation, and they're looking at your website and that of your competitors. And so this happens in so many conversations where I'll say, okay, so we know that our buyers have become researchers. Why should I choose you over your competition? Well, we have better quality, we have better service. And it's like, okay, don't you think your competitors would say the same thing? Yes. So then what makes you different? We're a family-run business. And it's like, but does that make that much of an impact? Like, and it's like, okay, no. So what really makes you different? And then they have to sit back and they think and they go, so if it's that hard for you to figure out what really makes you different, how do you expect your clients to figure out the same thing? And so we know a confused buyer doesn't buy, number one, but also number two, if it makes it that hard for them to figure out what makes you different, if I'm going to compete in that industry, the first thing I'm going to do is create this clear differentiation between me and the next person. And it's much more than what a lot of, people talk about USPs, unique selling propositions, because it's not just about being unique. It's what we call a UAP, or unique advantage point. Like, what is your unique advantage? Not a unique selling proposition, but more of a unique advantage. Why is working with you give me a better advantage than working with other people? And, that would be another big one, like really making sure our buyers are researchers that you're going to out. The other thing is people that are trapped in this idea of thinking we're either in a good economy or a bad economy. It's like, we're not in either one, a good or a bad economy. We're just in a different economy. People are still spending money. We're just in a different economy. Have they adapted their strategies in order to compete in the different economy? And lo and behold, most have yet to adapt and adjust.
Interesting. In that situation, especially for small business owner, and I'm speaking specifically in meetings in an industry, it's a service industry, it's a people industry, and you have the relationship with those customer that sometimes not getting the appreciation that they should get for what you do, and even worse, might actually be a client that you don't want to have. And I think it's similar in what you do. What is your advice to have the right clients for your business? And have you fired, sure the answer is yes, but have you fired client? And if you can be sharing a little bit more example of that so that people who are listening, despite the economy, despite the challenge, always keep their eyes on the long term and keep looking at the right clients.
Yeah, for sure. Bringing in the wrong client can negatively impact culture, productivity, and so forth. It's what I lovingly refer to as a turd in the swimming pool, right? You bring the wrong client and it just ruins the whole pool, right? So it's like we had a client at one point. This particular client had already paid me over $1.5 million in consulting. And so the biggest client we had up to date. I mean, there were some months where he would pay me over $200,000 just to be able to provide him with some advice. But he started disrespecting my team, really talking down to my team. And, I cautioned him that that was just something that was unacceptable and that the team didn't feel that was right. But he looked at it and was like, BS, like, what are you going to do? Fire me? I'm paying you so much money. Like, no way. So I did just that and I fired her. Now the team was rocked to their core. They couldn't believe that I did that. They were just like, oh my God. I mean, because the next highest paying client was, significantly lower than 200,000 in a month, right? Like significantly lower. I can't believe you did that. I said, well, our culture is that you can't give me or anybody else the team a headache. That applies to us, our vendors, our clients. So, we have to, integrity means we have to do what we say we're going to do. So we have to make sure that we hold that integrity. And so that's when I let them go. When it comes to like knowing who your good clients are, like there are going to be certain things that you articulate as a team as being your non-negotiables. Like for us, we call these people yeah buts. We're in the coaching business. If you start talking to somebody and give them a little bit of advice and they go, yeah, but you know what I'm talking about, right, Eric? Oh, yes. So, we call these people yeah buts. And so we're like, you know what? It's probably not going to be a right fit right now because it's just going to be conflict right off the beginning. Or, one of the biggest problems that the businesses have is what we call mismanaged expectations. And so if you're talking to a client and you believe that you can comfortably add, say, 50% growth to their bottom line, but they want 400% growth, you just don't see that possible. And on one hand, there's a lot of coaches that would just sell them on this idea and this dream, like, we'll go ahead and we'll help you do it. But when you're mismanaging expectations and you're unable to deliver on a promise, you'll get a short-term gain for long-term pain.
Right.
It doesn't help. So just know your non-negotiables. Know, what, you want them coachable. We always say, if we don't feel like we could do business on a handshake, then we're not going to do business with you. Like we want to make sure that there's a real relationship there. And then as a result, with the people that we work with, I mean, we tend to be the first one to know when they're having a baby, like before their parents even know. We tend to be the first one to know when there's a big major milestone, when they're going to get proposed to their significant other, when all this other stuff is going on. Like we're like the first people to know. And that is such a huge, like that, for me, that's like one of the things that I love most about my role is that I have such good friendships. I tell my kids I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I get paid all day to talk to my friends, right? And I get to help them and I love to do that. So it's like, yeah, where your good clients are. Could you see them being a friend? It's like, yeah, okay, you know what? It's a good client. They coachable?
Well, that's the thing. Interestingly, I think that you made a very strong point on the toxicity of the wrong people. That could be somebody in your team is very toxic, might be very the best salesperson, but if they're toxic for the culture, it's very bad. But most importantly for me is really the clients that we had when I had the corporate event agency back then in Belgium. I remember 2 clients specifically that I fired and actually create a positive signal within the team and brought more people together and a relief. And you can look at it like more of a joke, but Charlie, I always love speaking with you, and obviously the format of this podcast. I'm not Joe Rogan speaking for 2 hours, so uh, although I love the guy, but I'd like to finish this conversation talking about how you cope with being overwhelmed. Because all the entrepreneurs that I know, they're alone, they feel overwhelmed. How do you cope with that? And what are your advice to basically going back to your bases and being solid in what you do?
So I'd be lying to you if I told you that it's not something that I juggle with on a continual basis. Look, I'm an entrepreneur with big dreams and aspirations. I want to conquer the world in one bite. It's very easy to get overwhelmed. But, the way that I liken it is, or the example, the metaphor that I like to use is, let's say, we're here in Florida and we want to drive up to Boston. And so the way that a lot of people would look at that and be like, okay, we got to drive up to Boston. All right, I got to fill the car up with gas. I got to pack all the luggage. I got to get the kids and the dogs in the car. What's the music that we're going to listen? That's a long time. What's the music that we're going to listen to the whole time? What if the kids have to pee? Where are we going to stop? We're going to do lunch. We're going to do dinner. We've got all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, you haven't even driven an hour, and you're so overwhelmed with all the what ifs and everything that needs to do. It's like, eventually you get to the point where it's like, is it even worth getting on the road? But that's when overwhelm takes place. When you get clear on what you want, if you just take a step back for a minute, you go, okay, what are we doing? We're going to drive to Boston. So we're going to drive to Boston. What does that need to look like in order for it to feel like most enjoyable ride ever? Well, most enjoyable ride ever. Say, need to be there in 4 days, stop, see the sights and so forth. Okay, awesome. So what needs to be true in order for this to happen? So you'd start to lay it out. This is what needs to be true. Okay. What would stop, prevent, or otherwise slow you down from doing that? Oh, will be this, this, and this. Like, okay. So why don't we first make sure that we can eliminate any of the constraints that would stop, prevent us, or slow us down? Make sure we have a plan of action for that. Might be like, oh, well, the hotels might be sold out. All right, let's just book our hotels at a time to know where we're going to go. And then all of a sudden, it's like, rather than building a whole list of to-dos, most of them inconsequential, you begin to look at what are the things that need to be true, both to make it happen and would stop, prevent you, and slow you down. And those become significant milestones or markers that actually are needle movers. They make the difference into whether or not you're going to get there and get there successfully or not. And then that just becomes the focus. Instead of just be like, oh, I got to do everything. I got to feed the kids. And then the dog's going to have to go out. And then this and that. And it's like, it's overwhelming. And so that's how I avoid overwhelm. I even took some time yesterday, 10 minutes, not a lot of time. And just started writing down, okay, hold on. I'm starting to get overwhelmed. What do I want this to look like? I started writing down what I wanted this to look like and I go, okay. And then all of a sudden I felt better because then I can begin to see what success looks like. And then a lot of the things that I thought I needed to do was just like, nope, don't need to do those anymore.
Yeah. It's just going back to what you want and it was essential for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I joined the club. I'm just like you. It's a roller coaster and it's very exciting as well. My two last questions. The first one is, you wrote the book, Predictable Profits. How could people get in touch with you?
Do you mean this book, Eric? So yeah, the easiest way for people to get in touch with me would just predictableprofits.com. That would be the easiest thing, or any of our social channels. I'll either be under Predictable Profits or you can find me at Charles Gaudet, on those platforms.
Awesome. And my last question, you never know who's listening. And I have example of people that have been guests on my podcast and League at an opening for business. You never know. So what is one of your dream, private, business-wise, that you want to share so that if anybody's listening and want to help you, they know that this is exactly what you're looking for?
Wow. That's a really great question. I'm actually going to say that rather than it being my dream, it's going to be my kid's dream. And particularly my son is training to be a professional race car driver. And he's done very well so far, but he's very early on, and it requires a lot of connections, sponsors, things to help him advance that career. So I would say for starters, that would be it. Anybody that would be able to have those connections, contacts, whether it's sponsors or racing teams or whatever that might be, that would be where I would go.
Wonderful. Charlie, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.
That you will. Awesome, buddy.
Charlie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm always learning, listening to your insight and you sharing your experience. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please follow me on LinkedIn. I'll just go to the website eventbusinessformula.com, where you will find a lot of resources. And if you learn anything today, please share this episode with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.